Hi friends, this is Seth Gruber with Life Training Institute, and this is my series of pro-life training videos called Pro-Life Thinking Thursdays, where each week I examine an argument for abortion and provide the pro-life response to that argument, in hopes that you will be better equipped to be ambassadors for the unborn children in your midst. And this is episode 6, and this week I wanted to examine an argument not necessarily for abortion, but an argument for neutrality. And unfortunately, this argument typically comes from Christian leaders and pastors when they tell pro-life advocates or the pro-life movement that abortion is not the responsibility of the church, because the mission and responsibility of the church is the Great Commission, whereas the mission and responsibility of the pro-life movement is the abolition of abortion. But we shouldn't expect a marriage of the two missions, but rather allow each entity to live out its own mission individually. Now, before we begin to formulate a pro-life response to this argument, we need to determine the nature of the Great Commission. What is it? Because if the Great Commission is the mission of the church, then we need to understand what that mission is before we can know whether or not abortion is part of that mission. And in Matthew 28, we're told exactly what the Great Commission is. Jesus, after his resurrection and before his ascension, tells his disciples to go to all nations, creating disciples, baptizing them, and teaching them to obey everything that he has commanded. So the Great Commission is twofold, but many pastors talk about the Great Commission as if it only entails the first commandment, which is to create disciples, completely ignoring the second portion of the Great Commission, which is then to teach those disciples to obey everything that Jesus commanded. Well, what did he command? Well, the entirety of Scripture is what Jesus as God commanded. And Jesus, in his brilliance, understanding the burden and weight of the law, simplified all of the law and the prophets down to 2 commandments. And in Mark 12, we're told what those 2 commandments are: to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. So to fulfill the Great Commission, we also have to teach others to obey everything Jesus commanded, which can be simplified to love God, love others, or love your neighbor as yourself. Now, pastors who say that abortion is not the responsibility of the church clearly believe that we're called to love our neighbors, but for some reason the unborn is not included in the category of neighbor. So why the double standard? Because I guarantee you the same pastors would never argue that caring for orphans, widows, and children is not the responsibility of the church. So if the unborn is not our neighbor, then abortion is not the responsibility of the church. However, if the unborn is our neighbor, then abortion is indeed the responsibility of the church, because the responsibility of the church is the Great Commission, which includes loving our neighbors. So this leads us to the question, who is our neighbor? The same question that a lawyer asked Jesus in Luke 10. Scripture teaches that all human beings are our neighbors, because all human beings are created in the image of God and bear the imago Dei. So, is the unborn our neighbor? Well, yes, if they are human beings like us. And the science of embryology teaches that from the moment of conception, each of us began our lives as human beings. And Scripture teaches that all human beings, whether born or unborn, have the imago Dei and are created in the image of God and have value as such. So the unborn is our neighbor, and the Great Commission commands us to teach people to obey everything Jesus commanded, which includes loving our neighbors. So if the Great Commission is the responsibility of the church, then loving our unborn neighbors is also the responsibility of the church. We can't be true to the Great Commission if we ignore the 1.2 million unborn image bearers who are being slaughtered through abortion each year in the United States. Instead, may we as the church radically love our neighbors, both born and unborn, and therefore truly fulfill the Great Commission. Thanks for joining me, and I look forward to being with you next week for Pro-Life Thinking Thursdays.